Garrison
I left
Jace
you my
thought it was
map.
just another piece of
Please
trash on
come.
his windshield, until he unfolded the notebook paper and read, "I can't eat. Please come. Rowan, age 7, 3:52 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon." Garrison stood in the grocery store parking lot, staring at a child's hand-drawn map, crooked blue lines leading to a red X. The boy's handwriting had been shaking when he wrote it. Garrison's hands were shaking now. Because if this 7-year-old had spent 13 months invisible to every adult who should have helped, he had exactly 48 hours until the court made it permanent. All Garrison had was a crayon map, 8 desperate words, and one phone number that would bring 397 Hells Angels to Tennessee. This is Rowan's story. And the part nobody saw coming wasn't the rescue. It was what the bikers found when they started digging. If you believe the scariest-looking person in a room might be the gentlest when it counts, subscribe to this channel. Comment where you're watching from, because this story is going to show you why listening to a child when they're asking for help can mean the difference between life and death. And if you've ever felt invisible, this one's for you. I left you my map. Please come. That's what the note said. 8 words. Written in careful block letters, the way a second grader writes when they know it has to be perfect or nobody will read it. The handwriting had been shaking when Rowan wrote it. Garrison Cobra Jace's hands were shaking now, standing in the parking lot at 3:52 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon in mid-October, staring at a piece of lined notebook paper that shouldn't exist. Because 7-year-olds don't write maps to their own abuse, unless they've tried everything else. Cobra looked up. The boy was still there, 10 feet away, shoulders pulled inward, holding his own wrists crossed in front of him like he was protecting them. His eyes were too wide for his face, sunken cheeks, skin with a gray undertone that didn't come from a week of bad sleep. It came from months of the body eating itself. Cobra set his grocery bag on the bike seat. Motor oil, a sandwich, black coffee in a paper cup. He unfolded the note fully. On the inside, a child's drawing of a street grid, crooked lines in blue pen, a red X marking one specific house, the words written beneath, "I can't eat. Please come. Rowan, age 7. And beneath that, in smaller letters, an address. 214 Breckenridge Mill Road. Cobra crouched. A big man folding himself down until he was shorter than the child, eye level, the way you do when you need someone to know you're not a threat. His knees cracked. He was 50 years old. He'd been president of this chapter for 11 years. Before that, he'd worked CPS intake for 6 years, until the day he watched a file get buried and a child get sent back, and he'd walked out and never gone back. He knew what this was. He knew what it meant when a kid this small, this methodical, walked up to a stranger in a parking lot and handed them a map. "You did right, coming to me," Cobra said. His voice was quiet, graveled. Zero condescension. "Stay close." Rowan's eyes flickered to the parking lot entrance, then back, checking for the man who would come if someone called. The man who always came. "He locks the shed," Rowan said. Flat, no inflection, the voice of a child who'd learned to speak without drawing attention. "I can't get out. I haven't eaten since yesterday morning." Cobra's jaw tightened. He placed one hand flat on Rowan's back, between his shoulder blades. Not gripping, just present, anchoring. And he kept his own body positioned between Rowan and the parking lot entrance, where a silver sedan or a black truck or whoever Randall Pruitt drove might pull in at any second. "When did you eat last?" Cobra asked. "Yesterday, 6 o'clock. 1 meal a day. That's the rule. Cobra's hand stayed where it was. His other hand reached into the grocery bag and pulled out the sandwich. Turkey, lettuce, plain bread, gas station quality, but unopened. He handed it to Rowan without a word. Rowan stared at it, then at Cobra, then back at the sandwich. "It's yours," Cobra said. "Eat." Rowan took it, peeled back the plastic wrap with shaking hands, took one bite, chewed slowly, like his body had forgotten how, swallowed, took another. Cobra watched, counted the seconds. 11 seconds between bites. The boy's hands weren't just shaking from hunger, they were shaking from fear that someone would take it away. "How long's this been going on?" Cobra asked. 9 months, Rowan said, still chewing, since he started locking the pantry. "And the shed? 6 months, when I tried to tell my teacher." Cobra's hand on Rowan's back pressed slightly firmer, steadying. "What happened when you told your teacher?" "She filed a report. Mr. Pruitt saw it. He works at the county. He made it go away. He told her I have adjustment disorder and I make up stories." Rowan took another bite. She believed him. Everybody believes him. The parking lot was still moderately full. 11 to 14 people moving between cars, shopping carts rattling on pavement, the distant sound of a freight train horn from the rail crossing 2 blocks east. Nobody was looking at them. Nobody saw the boy with bruises on his forearms eating a gas station sandwich like it was the only thing keeping him alive. Because that's how it always worked. Evil didn't happen in dark alleys. It happened in grocery store parking lots on Tuesday afternoons while people loaded groceries into their trunks and checked their phones and drove home. Cobra pulled his phone from his vest pocket. Opened it. Pulled up a contact. Hit call. 1 ring. 2. "Yeah." The voice on the other end was rough, immediate, no greeting needed. "Gallows, it's Cobra. I need the brothers. All of them. Now." A pause. In the background, the sound of something metal clanging. Gallows was at the clubhouse, probably working on a bike. "What's the situation?" 7-year-old boy, locked in a shed, starved, bruises, court filing in 48 hours that's going to give permanent custody to the man doing it." Cobra's voice stayed level, but his free hand had curled into a fist. "And Gallows, he's done this before." The line went quiet. Not hesitation. Calculation. "Where are you?" Gallows asked. "Millbrook Community Grocery, East Lot." "Don't move. I'm making calls." The line went dead. Cobra looked at Rowan. The boy had finished half the sandwich and was holding the rest like he wanted to save it. Like food was something you hoarded because you didn't know when the next meal would come. "You're not going back there," Cobra said. It wasn't a comfort. It was a fact. Not to the shed. Not to that house. Not to him. "You've got my word. And my word has teeth." Rowan looked at him. 7 years old, 11 pounds underweight, skin the color of exhaustion, holding a half-eaten sandwich in hands that wouldn't stop shaking. And for the first time in 11 months, something in his face shifted. Not hope, not yet, but the beginning of the thought that maybe, this time, would be different. Cobra pulled the bandana from around his wrist. Faded black. 27 years of road on it. Sweat and dust. And every mile he'd ridden since the day he came home from Vietnam to find his son's grave marker and a case file marked closed. He tied it loosely around Rowan's left wrist, over the greenish-yellow bruise, 4 inches long, consistent with grip marks. "This means you're under protection," Cobra said. "Nobody touches you. Not Pruitt, not the county, nobody." Rowan looked at the bandana, then at Cobra. Then he nodded once. At the clubhouse, 12 miles west on Route 47, Gallows hung up the phone and stood for 3 seconds in the middle of the garage bay, staring at the oil-stained concrete floor. He was 61 years old, 30 years with the chapter. He'd seen Cobra make that call before, the voice that went flat and final when a line had been crossed. And he knew what he's done this before meant. Gallows pulled his own phone back out, opened his contacts, started dialing. The first call went to Ironside. "Yeah," Ironside answered. Background noise, hospital sounds, beeping monitors, voices over a PA system. Hank Dubois, road name Ironside, 47 years old, former Army combat medic. He'd spent 2 tours in Afghanistan patching holes in 18-year-olds and learning that sometimes the enemy wasn't the one shooting at you. It was the infection that came 3 days later if you didn't clean the wound right. "Need you at the clubhouse," Gallows said. "Cobra's got a kid. Medical triage, malnutrition, visible bruising, possible worse." Ironside didn't ask questions. 20 minutes. The second call went to Tombstone. Carl Wheatley, 55 years old. Ex-county family court judge, disbarred 3 years ago for refusing to sign a ruling he knew was corrupt. He'd walked out of that courtroom, turned in his gavel, and never looked back. Now he worked as a paralegal for a civil rights firm and rode with the chapter on weekends. "Gallows," Tombstone said. His voice was always calm, always measured, the voice of a man who'd spent 2 decades listening to people lie under oath. "What do you need?" "Emergency custody block. Permanent guardianship filing set for Friday, 8 a.m., Millbrook County Family Court. We need it stopped before the gavel falls." "Who's the petitioner?" "Randall Pruitt." Tombstone went silent, then, "The coordinator?" "Yeah. I know that name." Tombstone's voice shifted, still calm, but colder now. "Dale Newcomb case, 2 years ago. Kid died in Pruitt's custody. Accidental fall, they said. File closed in 72 hours. Gallows' hand tightened on the phone. "Cobra said he's done this before." "He has," Tombstone said, "and nobody proved it. But I remember the file. I remember thinking something was wrong and not having jurisdiction to dig." "What's the victim's name this time?" "Rowan Calloway, 7 years old." "I'll pull the filing. If there's a procedural gap, I'll find it. If there's not, I'll create one." Tombstone paused. "How bad is the kid?" Cobra's words, locked in a shed, starved, bruises, court filing in 48 hours. "Then we don't have time to be polite," Tombstone said. "I'm on it." The third call went to Cinder. Ray Boggs, 43. Former firefighter, retired after a warehouse collapse left him with a bum knee and a permanent limp. He'd spent 15 years running into burning buildings while everyone else ran out, and he'd learned 2 things: how to stay calm when everything was on fire, and how to coordinate 300 people moving in the same direction without chaos. "Gallows," Cinder answered. "What's up?" "Large-scale mobilization. Cobra's got a kid who needs immediate extraction, and we're going to need visibility. Full chapter presence. Coordinated, disciplined, no mistakes." "How many?" "All of them," Gallows said. "And I'm making calls to Kentucky and Georgia. This one's going to be big." Cinder didn't hesitate. "Where and when?" "Stand by for location. Probably within the hour." "And Cinder, this is a residential street. Middle-class neighborhood. We show up wrong, someone calls the cops, and the whole thing falls apart." "Understood. I'll map staging points. We'll come in clean." The fourth call went to Switchback. Dennis Haverford, 49. Retired parole officer. 23 years watching people lie about where they'd been and what they'd done. and learning to spot the difference between someone who made a mistake and someone who was working a system. He knew Randall Pruitt's name, too. He'd known it for 2 years. "Gallows," Switchback said. "I'm guessing this is about Pruitt." "How'd you know?" "Because I've been waiting for this call since Dale Newcomb died." Switchback's voice was tight. Controlled anger, the kind that didn't explode. It calcified. "What do you need?" "Everything you've got. Files, records, anyone who worked the Dale case and thought something was wrong. I've got a contact at the county clerk's office, Wendell Marsh. He's dirty, handled paperwork for Pruitt on the Dale case, helped expedite the trust payout. If Pruitt's running the same play, Marsh is involved again." "Can you prove it?" "Not yet. But if Cobra's got the kid and the kid can talk, we might not need to. Kids remember things adults think they're too young to understand." "Get what you can," Gallows said. "And Switchback, we've got 48 hours before that filing goes through. After that, the money moves and the kid's stuck." "Not if we move first," Switchback said. "I'm on my way." Gallows ended the call, stood in the garage bay for another 5 seconds. Then he walked to the cabinet in the back corner, pulled out a logbook, and opened it to the current week. The chapter had 127 active members. But the network was bigger than that. 4 other chapters within riding distance: Kentucky, Georgia, Alabama, men who'd ridden together for decades, who trusted each other's word without needing proof. Gallows picked up the landline. Old rotary phone, still worked, more reliable than cell service when you needed to reach someone in the hills. He started dialing. By the time Cobra pulled into the clubhouse parking lot with Rowan sitting on the back of his bike, arms wrapped tight around Cobra's waist, face pressed against the leather vest, the word had already gone out. And the brothers were coming. The clubhouse sat on 11 acres of scrub pine and gravel off Route 47, 20 minutes outside Millbrook proper. Single-story brick building, flat roof, American flag on a pole out front. No signs, no advertisements, just a driveway that curved back into the trees and a parking lot that could hold 200 bikes when the chapter gathered. Right now, there were 14. By tomorrow night, there would be more than 300. Cobra killed the engine. The sudden silence felt heavy. Rowan didn't let go immediately. His arms stayed locked around Cobra's ribs for another 3 seconds before he loosened his grip and slid off the back of the bike. The clubhouse door opened. Ironside stepped out first, tall, broad-shouldered, graying beard, wearing scrubs under a leather vest because he'd come straight from his shift at Millbrook General. He had a duffel bag slung over one shoulder. Medical kit. The kind you took into the field when a hospital wasn't an option. Gallows came out second. Older, quieter, moving with the steady deliberation of a man who'd made hard decisions for 30 years and learned not to rush them. He looked at Rowan, then at Cobra, and nodded once. "Inside," Gallows said. Not a command. A direction. Cobra placed his hand on Rowan's shoulder, same anchoring touch, gentle pressure, and walked him toward the door. Rowan's sneakers scraped on the gravel, left sole flapping slightly with each step. Inside, the clubhouse was exactly what it needed to be. Functional. Long wooden table in the center. Mismatched chairs. A kitchenette against the back wall. A refrigerator that hummed too loud. Framed photos on the walls. Chapter rides, memorial services, a black and white shot from 1978 showing men half this age standing in front of bikes that didn't exist anymore. Ironside set his duffel on the table. Unzipped it. Pulled out a stethoscope, a blood pressure cuff, a pen light, latex gloves. "Rowan," Ironside said. His voice was calm, practiced, the voice of someone who'd talked to scared kids in field hospitals when mortars were falling a mile away. "My name's Hank. Road name's Ironside. I'm a medic. I need to check you over. Make sure you're okay. Is that all right? Rowan looked at Cobra. Cobra nodded. He's good. You're safe. Rowan turned back to Ironside. Nodded. Ironside crouched, same way Cobra had, making himself smaller, less intimidating. He pulled on the gloves. I'm going to listen to your heart and lungs first, then I'm going to check your arms and legs for injuries. If anything hurts, you tell me, okay? Okay, Rowan said. Ironside placed the stethoscope against Rowan's chest, over the oversized hoodie. Listened. Moved it. Listened again. His face didn't change, but his eyes flicked to Cobra for half a second. Elevated heart rate. Shallow breathing. He moved the stethoscope to Rowan's back. Listened. Moved it lower. Listened again. Then he set it down and gently lifted the sleeve of Rowan's hoodie, exposing his right forearm. The bruise was greenish-yellow now, 5 days old, 4 inches long. The shape was unmistakable. 4 fingers on the outside, a thumb on the inside. Grip marks. Adult-sized hand. Hard enough to leave color that hadn't faded yet. Ironside's jaw tightened. He didn't say anything. Just lifted the other sleeve. More bruises. Smaller. Older. Layered. Rowan, Ironside said quietly. Do you have any other injuries I should know about? Rowan hesitated, then lifted his left pant leg. A circular abrasion on his knee, poorly cleaned, showing early signs of infection. Red around the edges. Scabbed in the center. Ironside pulled a bottle of antiseptic from the duffel. This is going to sting a little, but it'll help it heal. He cleaned the wound carefully. Rowan didn't flinch, didn't make a sound. Just stared at the wall and counted ceiling tiles silently, his mouth barely moving. Ironside applied a bandage, pulled Rowan's pant leg back down. Then he looked at Cobra. 11 pounds underweight, minimum, Ironside said. His voice was clinical now, the voice of someone giving a field report. Visible malnutrition, dehydration, multiple contusions in various stages of healing, consistent with repeated physical restraint. That knee wound is infected, needs antibiotics. If he doesn't get proper nutrition in the next 72 hours, we're looking at permanent cognitive impact and cardiac stress. Cobra's hands curled into fists. He didn't move, didn't speak. Just let the words land. Gallows stepped forward. What does he need right now? Food, water, rest, and a hospital visit within 24 hours for blood work and a full physical. Ironside looked at Rowan. But first he needs to know he's safe, because his nervous system is in survival mode, and until that shifts, his body won't start healing. Cobra crouched next to Rowan again. Eye level. You hungry? Rowan nodded. What do you want to eat? Rowan blinked, like the question didn't make sense, like want wasn't a word that applied to food. Anything, Rowan said finally. Cobra stood, walked to the kitchenette, opened the refrigerator, pulled out eggs, butter, bread, set a pan on the stove, cracked 2 eggs into it. The sound of them hitting the pan, soft sizzle, familiar, ordinary, filled the room. Nobody spoke while Cobra cooked. Ironside packed up his kit. Gallows sat at the table, hands folded, watching Rowan with the steady patience of a man who knew that trust wasn't given. It was earned in small, quiet moments like this one. Cobra plated the eggs, added 2 slices of buttered toast, set the plate in front of Rowan, handed him a fork. Eat slow, Cobra said. Your stomach's not used to it. Rowan picked up the fork, took a bite of eggs, chewed, swallowed. Took another. And for the first time in 11 months, nobody told him to stop. Nobody took the plate away. Nobody locked the food up and told him he'd get more tomorrow if he followed the rules. The refrigerator hummed. The eggs cooled slightly on the plate. And every man in that room understood what they were looking at. This wasn't just hunger. This was systematic deprivation designed to break a child's will. And the man who'd done it was 11 miles away, probably sitting in his clean kitchen, checking his watch, wondering when Rowan would come home. Cobra's phone buzzed. He pulled it out. Text from Tombstone. Filing pulled. Pruitt's petition cites behavioral stabilization achieved and minor's best interest. Trust release clause confirms $247,800 disperses upon permanent order signature. Friday, 8 a.m. Judge Haverford presiding. Cobra read it twice, then showed it to Gallows. Gallows's expression didn't change, but his voice, when he spoke, was colder than Cobra had heard it in years. $247,800, Gallows said. That's what Rowan's life is worth to Randall Pruitt. He looked at Rowan. The boy was still eating, slowly, carefully, like he was rationing a meal that might be his last. Dale Newcomb's payout was $163,400, Gallows continued. Pruitt walked away with that money 23 months ago. Nobody questioned it. Nobody audited the account. The funeral home that handled Dale's body? Associate of Pruitt's. The medical examiner who signed off on accidental death didn't order an independent autopsy. And now he's doing it again, Cobra said. Yeah. Gallows leaned back in his chair. But this time, the kid's still alive. And this time, we know. The door opened. Tombstone walked in. Gray hair, wire-rimmed glasses, collared shirt under his vest, carrying a leather briefcase that looked like it had survived 2 decades of courtroom battles. He set the briefcase on the table, opened it, pulled out a stack of documents. Permanent guardianship petition, Tombstone said, spreading the pages out. Filed 6 weeks ago. Pruitt's cited as court-appointed temporary guardian following the death of both biological parents 11 months ago. Workers' comp settlement from Raymond Calloway's workplace fatality, $247,800 held in a minor's trust pending permanent guardianship order. He tapped one page. Here's the clause. Upon signature of permanent order, trust management transfers to legal guardian with full discretionary control. No audit requirement, no court oversight, just a signature, and the money moves. Can you block it? Cobra asked. Tombstone pulled off his glasses, rubbed the bridge of his nose. Legally? Maybe. If I can find a procedural gap or file an emergency motion citing new evidence. But Pruitt's a licensed coordinator. He knows the system. He's been setting this up for 11 months. Every form is filed correctly. Every deadline met. Every box checked. So what do we do? Ironside asked. Tombstone looked at Rowan. The boy had finished the eggs and was staring at the empty plate like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to ask for more. We give the court a reason to stop, Tombstone said. We document everything, medical evidence, witness testimony, physical proof. We build a case so airtight that when I walk into that courtroom Friday morning, the judge has no choice but to deny the petition and open a criminal investigation. And if that's not enough? Gallows asked. Tombstone's mouth tightened into a line. Then we make sure the FBI gets every piece of evidence we have before Pruitt gets on that plane to Cancun Saturday morning. Cobra's head snapped up. What plane? Switchback walked in. Jeans, boots, flannel shirt, vest, carrying a manila folder. He dropped it on the table next to Tombstone's briefcase. Boarding pass, Switchback said. Found it on Pruitt's kitchen counter during a welfare check I ran this afternoon. He opened the folder, pulled out a photo. Cell phone pic, slightly blurry, showing a printed boarding pass on a granite countertop. Millbrook to Cancun, Saturday morning, 9:45 a.m., 10-day trip, non-refundable. The room went quiet. "He's planning to run," Cobra said. "Or he's planning to celebrate," Switchback corrected. "Either way, the timing tells us everything. Friday morning, the gavel falls, money transfers. Saturday morning, he's gone. By the time anyone figures out something's wrong, he's in another country with $250,000 and no extradition treaty." Ironside looked at Rowan. "What happens to the kid?" Nobody answered. Because they all knew. Dale Newcomb had died of accidental injuries 3 weeks after his permanent guardianship order was signed. The payout had cleared. The body had been cremated. The file had been closed. And nobody had asked questions. Rowan set his fork down. Looked at Cobra. "Mr. Pruitt said Friday's the day. He told someone on the phone. He said the papers go through at 8 in the morning and the money's his when the ink dries." Every head in the room turned. "You heard him say that?" Cobra asked. Rowan nodded. "Monday night. I was under the kitchen table. He didn't know I was there. He was talking to someone named Wendell. He said 247, 800. He said same play as before, just cleaner. And he said the other boy's name was Dale." The silence that followed wasn't just quiet. It was the kind of silence that happens when a truth lands so hard it shatters everything around it. Switchback's hand was already on his phone. "Wendell Marsh, County Clerk Associate. I knew it." Tombstone was writing fast, filling a legal pad with notes. "That's a recorded confession. If we can verify the conversation—" "We can't," Gallows interrupted. "The kid didn't record it. It's his word against Pruitt's." "His word is enough," Cobra said. His voice was flat. Final. "Because I believe him, and I'm going to make sure everyone else does too." He looked at Rowan. "You're going to tell that story again, to people who can stop him, and this time they're going to listen, because you're not alone anymore." Rowan's hands, resting on the table, had stopped shaking. He looked at the empty plate, then at the men standing around the table. Ironside with his medical kit, Tombstone with his legal briefs, Switchback with his folder of evidence, Gallows with his phone already pulling up contact lists, Cobra with his jaw set and his word given. "Okay," Rowan said quietly. And for the first time in 11 months, he believed it might actually work. By Wednesday morning, the word had spread through 4 states: Kentucky, Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee chapters, all connected by decades of road and brotherhood and the understanding that when one chapter called for help, you didn't ask questions. You showed up. The mobilization didn't happen in a single dramatic moment. It happened in parking lots and driveways and gas stations across the South. Men checking tire pressure, filling tanks, texting wives and employers, and anyone who needed to know they'd be gone for a day, maybe 2. Packing water bottles and protein bars, and first aid kits because you didn't ride 4 hours without preparation. And by Wednesday, at 4 in the afternoon, they started arriving. Not in one roaring convoy. That would have triggered panic calls and roadblocks, and state police rolling in to shut it down before it started. Cinder had mapped 3 staging points: a truck stop outside Millbrook, a rest area on Route 47, and the back lot of an abandoned factory 2 miles from Breckenridge Mill Road. The bikes came in groups of 10 to 15, staggered by 30 minutes, parking in clean rows, engines cutting off almost in unison. By dusk, the count was 219. By Thursday morning, it was 312. And by Thursday at noon, when the brothers gathered for the final briefing at the clubhouse, the number had reached 397. 397 motorcycles. 397 men who'd dropped everything, driven hours, and shown up for a child they'd never met because one of their own had given his word. Gallows stood at the head of the table. The clubhouse was packed, standing room only, men lining the walls, sitting on the floor, filling the doorway. The air smelled like leather and motor oil and black coffee. "Here's what we know," Gallows said. His voice cut through the low murmur of conversation. "Rowan Calloway, 7 years old. Parents deceased 11 months ago. Placed with Randall Pruitt, licensed foster care coordinator, through the county system. For 9 months, Pruitt has systematically starved, isolated, and abused this child while using his institutional access to bury every complaint filed against him." He paused. Let that land. Friday morning, 8 a.m., Millbrook County Family Court. Permanent guardianship hearing. If that gavel falls, Pruitt gains legal control of a $247,000 trust fund that belonged to Rowan's father. And based on what we've learned in the last 24 hours, there's reason to believe Rowan won't survive long after that money transfers. The room went completely silent. Dale Newcomb, Gallows continued. 9 years old. Previous foster child in Pruitt's custody. Died 23 months ago of what was ruled accidental injuries. Trust payout, $163,400. Transferred to Pruitt 6 weeks after Dale's death. No independent autopsy. No investigation. File closed in 72 hours. Someone in the back swore under their breath. "Tomorrow morning," Gallows said, "we're going to 214 Breckenridge Mill Road. We're going to document everything. We're going to collect witness testimony from every neighbor who saw something and didn't act. We're going to gather evidence that makes it impossible for the system to look away. And we're going to do it the right way, disciplined, coordinated, no mistakes. Because if we screw this up, Rowan goes back. And if Rowan goes back, he dies." He looked around the room. "Questions?" A hand went up. Younger brother, maybe 30, Kentucky patch on his vest. "What's the tactical plan?" Cinder stepped forward, unfolded a map on the table. "Breckenridge Mill Road is residential. Middle-class neighborhood. Quiet. We show up with 400 bikes making noise, someone calls the cops, and we're done before we start." He pointed to the map. "We stage here. 1 mile out. Public park with a large lot. Formation moves in at 7 a.m., 2 columns, tight and controlled. We park along the curb, one by one, engines off. No revving, no shouting. We stand. We don't block driveways, we don't threaten anyone. We make our presence known, and we let that presence do the work." "What about Pruitt?" someone asked. "Pruitt will be at home," Switchback said. "He works 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. Tomorrow's Thursday. He'll leave for work around 7:30. That's when we move." Tombstone adjusted his glasses. "I filed an emergency motion with the family court requesting a delay of Friday's hearing pending new evidence. The motion cites medical documentation of abuse, witness statements, and credible threat to the minor's safety. Judge Haverford is required to review it by end of business today." "Will he grant it?" someone asked. "Depends on whether he's willing to question one of his own coordinators," Tombstone said. "Pruitt's been in the system for 12 years. He's got relationships. He's vouched for by community leaders. The system protects its own." "Then we make sure the evidence is too loud to ignore," Cobra said. He was standing near the back, arms crossed, face unreadable. But his voice carried the weight of a man who'd already made his decision and wasn't asking for permission. "Rowan's with us now," Cobra continued. "Ironside's documented his injuries. We've got photos of the bruises, the infected knee, the physical evidence of starvation. We've got his testimony about being locked in the shed. We've got the overheard conversation where Pruitt admitted to a previous victim. And we've got 397 brothers willing to stand witness to the fact that this system failed. He paused. Tomorrow, we go to that house. We knock on every door. We ask every neighbor what they saw, and we give them one chance to tell the truth. The room erupted in a low rumble of agreement. Not shouts, not cheers, just the collective sound of men who understood what needed to be done and were ready to do it. Now, you might be thinking this is where it gets violent, where 400 bikers roll into a quiet neighborhood and someone gets hurt, where the scary-looking men with the vests and the tattoos lose control and prove every stereotype right. That's not what happened. Because the Hells Angels didn't show up to Breckenridge Mill Road to break things. They showed up to fix what the system had broken. And they did it with the kind of disciplined precision that would have made a military unit jealous. Thursday, 7:04 a.m. The rumble started low, distant, like thunder on the horizon. Louise Tanner, 68, retired schoolteacher, Rowan's nearest neighbor at 218 Breckenridge Mill Road, was standing in her kitchen making coffee when she heard it. She looked out the window, saw nothing. But the sound kept growing, a roar that shook windows. She walked to her front door, opened it, and froze. Motorcycles, hundreds of them, moving down Breckenridge Mill Road in two perfect columns, tight formation, synchronized, disciplined. They filled the street from end to end. Black leather, chrome, American flags, Hells Angels patches on every back. They parked along the curb, one by one. Engines cutting off in sequence until the street fell into a silence so heavy it felt like gravity had doubled. 397 bikers stood there, not moving, not shouting, not blocking driveways or breaking anything, just present. Louise's hand went to her mouth, because she knew why they were there. She'd seen Rowan in the yard 6 weeks ago, standing alone at 10 p.m. in a t-shirt when the temperature was 42 degrees. She'd thought he looked wrong, too thin, too still, eyes too wide. She'd gone back inside and told herself it wasn't her business. And now 400 men had shown up to make it everyone's business. Across the street, Roy Caldwell, 52, gas station attendant, stepped out onto his porch. He was the one who'd called the non-emergency line 3 months ago when Rowan knocked on his door asking for food. The officer had come. Had noted, child appeared distressed, but not in immediate danger. Had released Rowan to Pruitt without follow-up. Roy had watched Pruitt walk Rowan back across the street, one hand on the boy's shoulder, smiling like a concerned parent, and Roy had gone back inside and tried to forget it. He couldn't forget it now. 2 houses down, Patsy Mead, 61, grocery cashier, stood in her driveway holding her car keys. She was the one Rowan had asked to call for help 8 weeks ago. She'd called the number Rowan gave her. Pruitt's work cell. Pruitt had arrived in 8 minutes, shown his credentials, explained Rowan, wandered due to separation anxiety, and walked him out. She'd believed him. She'd let Rowan go. Cobra walked down the center of the street, slow, deliberate. Flanked by Gallows on his left and Ironside on his right. The formation of brothers parted to let them through, then closed behind them. Cobra stopped in front of 214 Breckenridge Mill Road, Randall Pruitt's house. Single-story ranch, beige siding, neat lawn, American flag on a pole near the mailbox. 2 cars in the driveway, a black F250 and a silver sedan. The front door opened. Randall Pruitt stepped out. 44 years old, 5'11", trim, clean-shaven, pressed khakis, collared shirt tucked in, lanyard with his DCS badge visible around his neck. He looked exactly like what he was supposed to be, a professional, a coordinator, someone you'd trust with your child. He smiled. It was a warm smile. Practiced. The kind of smile that had convinced teachers and neighbors and police officers that everything was fine. "Gentlemen," Pruitt said, his voice calm and unhurried. "I'm not sure what brings you to my home this morning, but I'm happy to talk. Can I help you with something?" Cobra didn't smile back. "We're here about Rowan Calloway." Pruitt's expression didn't change, not a flicker. "Rowan's my foster son. He's at school right now. If you have concerns about his welfare, I'd be happy to address them through the proper channels." "He's not at school," Cobra said. "He's with us." That's when the smile slipped. Just for 1 second. 1 second was enough. Pruitt's shoulders relaxed slightly. His palms opened, his head tilted, the charm offensive. "I understand this might look concerning," he said, his tone shifting to reasonable, self-deprecating. "But Rowan has some behavioral challenges. He's been through significant trauma, losing both parents in a terrible accident, and sometimes he acts out. If he told you something that worried you, I appreciate your concern, but I can assure you—" "How much does Rowan weigh?" Cobra interrupted. Pruitt blinked. "I'm sorry?" "His weight, how much?" I don't have that information off the top of my head." "He weighs 51 pounds, Ironside said, stepping forward. "He should weigh 62. That's 11 pounds underweight for a 7-year-old male. His BMI is 14.7. A pediatric ER physician would classify that as acute malnutrition requiring immediate intervention." Pruitt's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice steady. "Rowan's been a picky eater. I've been working with his doctor to address—" "What doctor?" Ironside asked. Silence. "Rowan hasn't seen a doctor in 11 months, Ironside continued. "There's no medical record of any wellness check, no referral for nutritional support, no follow-up on the injuries we documented yesterday. Bruises on both forearms consistent with adult grip marks, infected abrasion on his left knee, healing split on his lower lip. Do you want me to keep going?" Pruitt's expression shifted. The charm was gone. Now came the legal threat. "You are holding my foster son without my consent," Pruitt said, his voice sharper now. "That is custodial interference. I don't know who you think you are, but I am a licensed coordinator with the Department of Children's Services, and if you don't return Rowan to me immediately, I will have every one of you arrested." The brothers didn't react, didn't move, just stood there, silent, watching. Cobra took 1 step closer. "You're welcome to call the police. But before you do, you should know the FBI is already reviewing your case file. They're very interested in a conversation you had Monday night with Wendell Marsh about $247,800 and how it's the same play as before, just cleaner." Pruitt went completely still. "Dale Newcomb," Cobra said quietly. "Want to tell us what happened to him?" Pruitt's mouth opened, closed. His eyes darted to the street, 397 bikers, standing in silence, not a single one looking away. Then came the appeal to sympathy. "You don't understand," Pruitt said, his voice cracking slightly. "This job, it's impossible. You try to help these kids, and they lie. They manipulate. They make up stories because they're angry, or scared, or they don't want to follow rules. I've dedicated my life to this work. I've sacrificed everything. I'm not interested in your reasons," Cobra said. His voice was quiet. Absolute. Neither is Rowan. Pruitt stared at him, and for the first time, the mask came off completely. No charm, no legal threats, no performance. Just a man realizing that every strategy had failed. His hands, which had been open and gesturing, curled into fists. His breath came faster. And then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "I was careful. I was so careful." The room, the street, the moment, everything changed. Because that wasn't a defense. That was a confession. Cobra turned to Gallows, nodded once. Gallows pulled out his phone, made a call. "We're ready." 2 minutes later, 3 unmarked sedans pulled onto Breckenridge Mill Road, FBI, field office out of Nashville. They'd been waiting 2 blocks away, coordinating with Tombstone since yesterday afternoon. The lead agent stepped out. Plain clothes. Practical. Exhausted. She walked past the line of motorcycles without acknowledging them, straight to Pruitt's driveway. "Randall Pruitt?" she asked. Pruitt didn't answer. "Special Agent Sarah Kellerman, FBI. We have a warrant to search this property in connection with an ongoing federal investigation into financial fraud and abuse of a minor. You have the right to remain silent." The Miranda rights continued. Pruitt stood there, hands at his sides, staring at nothing. And as the agents moved into the house, as crime scene techs began photographing the shed in the backyard with its padlock still intact, as neighbors started coming out onto their porches and realizing what they were witnessing, one small detail stood out. Pruitt turned to Agent Kellerman and asked, quietly, if someone could call his neighbor about his mail, as if that were the thing that needed handling. Louise Tanner was the first neighbor to approach. She walked across her lawn slowly, hands shaking, and stopped in front of Cobra. She was crying. "I saw him," she said. Her voice broke. "6 weeks ago, in the yard, at night. It was cold, and he didn't have a jacket. I thought something was wrong, but I didn't. I didn't know what to do." Ironside pulled a notepad from his vest pocket. Started writing. "What's your name, ma'am?" "Louise Tanner. I live next door. I've been here 18 years. "Did you report what you saw to anyone?" Louise shook her head. "I thought about it, but I convinced myself I was overreacting, that maybe he'd just stepped outside for a minute, that his guardian would notice and bring him in." "How many times did you see Rowan outside alone?" Ironside asked. "3 times, maybe 4. Always at night. Always looking." She couldn't finish, covered her mouth with her hand. Cobra's voice was gentle. "You're telling us now. That matters." Roy Caldwell came next. 52, broad shoulders, rough hands, face lined from decades of standing in gas station sun. He'd seen things go wrong and learned not to get involved because involvement meant problems. But he was involved now. "I called the police," Roy said. His voice was flat, defeated. 3 months ago. Kid knocked on my door at 10 p.m., said he couldn't find food. I called non-emergency. Officer came out, talked to Pruitt, let the kid go back. I watched them walk across the street. I thought, "You thought the system worked," Ironside finished. "Yeah." "What happened after that?" "Nothing. I never saw the kid again, not outside, not in the windows, nowhere." Ironside wrote it down. "Thank you for coming forward." Patsy Mead was last. 61, gray hair pulled back, wearing the same grocery store uniform she'd worn the day Rowan asked for help. She couldn't stop crying. "He gave me a number to call," she said. "He said, 'Please call this person and tell them I need help.' I called it. I thought I was helping, but it was his number, Pruitt's number. And Pruitt came and took him and I—" Her voice cracked completely. "I let him go." She looked at Cobra. "Is he okay? Please tell me he's okay." "He's safe," Cobra said. "And because you're telling us this now, we have another piece of evidence that shows how Pruitt manipulated every attempt to help Rowan." By noon, the FBI had removed 17 boxes of documents from Pruitt's house. Financial records, case files, a folder labeled Dale Newcomb with insurance paperwork and bank statements showing a deposit of $163,400 dated 11 days after Dale's death. And in the shed, The 8 by 10 foot detached structure with a padlock on the outside and no insulation. They found a sleeping bag, a plastic bucket, and scratch marks on the inside of the door where Rowan had tried to open it. Agent Kellerman stood in the driveway, reviewing a tablet. She looked at Cobra. "How long has your chapter known about this?" 48 hours, Cobra said. "And in 48 hours, you documented more evidence than the county gathered in 11 months. We had a reason to look." Kellerman's mouth tightened. "We've been investigating Pruitt for 6 months. Financial irregularities tied to previous foster placements. But we couldn't prove intent. This," she gestured to the house, the shed, the street full of bikers. "This closes the gap. Rowan gets a victim advocate assigned before any interviews," Cobra said. "Already done. Nobody talks to him without him asking first." Kellerman nodded. "That's the job." She turned to leave, then stopped. "Mr. Jace?" Cobra looked at her. "You did right by him," she said. The call came at 2:17 p.m. Switchback, sitting in his truck outside the county clerk's office, phone pressed to his ear, listening to a contact he'd cultivated over 3 years of patient groundwork. A clerk who'd seen too much, stayed quiet too long, and finally decided enough was enough. "Wendell Marsh just shredded 4 file folders," the contact said. "Took them from his desk, walked to the industrial shredder, fed them through. Then he made 3 calls, then he left the building." "Where'd he go?" Switchback asked. "Parking garage. He's sitting in his car. He hasn't started the engine. He's just sitting there." Switchback ended the call. Texted Gallows. "Marsh is panicking. Moving now." The clubhouse felt different now. Not celebratory. Heavier. Because arresting one predator didn't fix the system that protected him. Cinder had set up a laptop on the main table, connected to a portable printer someone had hauled in from their office job. Tombstone sat across from him, legal pad covered in notes, 3 different highlighters marking sections of Pruitt's financial records. "Pull up Pruitt's bank statements," Tombstone said. "Last 18 months. Cinder's fingers moved across the keyboard. A spreadsheet appeared on screen. Rows and rows of transactions. "Look at the deposits," Tombstone said, pointing. "Here, June 14th, 2 years ago. $163,400. That's Dale Newcomb's trust payout, transferred 6 weeks after Dale died." He scrolled down. "Now look at the withdrawals. 3 days later, $52,000 to a car dealership. 2 weeks later, $18,700 to Reedville Marina. 1 month later, $31,200 to an offshore gambling account Pruitt used to clear debt." "He spent $100,000 in 2 months," Cinder said. "Yeah, and here." Tombstone pointed to another section. "Look at the pattern. Every 6 to 8 months, there's a spike in activity. Credit card charges, cash withdrawals, then a sudden influx of money, 50 to 80,000, followed by more spending." "How many times?" Gallows asked. Tombstone counted. 7 deposits over 4 years that match this pattern. Not all of them are trust payouts. Some are smaller, insurance settlements, estate disbursements, but the signature's the same. Pruitt gets access to money through a vulnerable person under his care, spends it fast, then needs more. Ironside leaned forward. "How many victims are we talking about?" Tombstone pulled a different document. "Dale Newcomb, we know. Rowan Calloway, we stopped. But based on these financials and cross-referencing with DCS placement records..." He paused. Looked up. 5 other names. All minors. All placed with Pruitt between 3 and 6 years ago. All removed from his care after short periods, classified as failed placements or voluntary relocations. "Where are they now?" Cobra asked. 3 were transferred to other counties. 1 aged out of the system. 1, Tombstone's voice went flat. One died. Classified as suicide. 16 years old. No investigation. The refrigerator hummed. Someone's phone buzzed and was immediately silenced, and every man in that room understood they weren't just trying to save Rowan. They were trying to stop something that had been killing for years. Switchback found Wendell Marsh in the parking garage, 3rd level, sitting in a gray Camry with the engine off and both hands on the steering wheel. Marsh was 53. Thin. Balding. The kind of man who'd spent 30 years pushing paper and never questioning where it went, because questioning meant responsibility. Switchback knocked on the window. Marsh jumped. Looked at Switchback. Looked at the Hell's Angels patch on his vest. His face went white. "Step out of the car, Wendell," Switchback said. Not a threat. A direction. Marsh's hands were shaking when he opened the door. He stood next to the Camry, shoulders hunched, eyes on the ground. "I didn't hurt anyone," Marsh said immediately. I just processed paperwork. That's all I did." "Dale Newcomb," Switchback said. "Tell me about Dale." Marsh's breath came faster. I handled the trust disbursement. Randall had the guardianship order. The payout was legal. You expedited it," Switchback said. "Dale died on a Thursday. By the following Tuesday, the money was in Pruitt's account. Normal processing takes 3 weeks minimum. You made it happen in 5 days." Marsh didn't deny it. "How much did Pruitt pay you?" Switchback asked. $5,000. Marsh's voice was barely audible. "He said it was a consulting fee. He said everything was legitimate. He said—" His voice cracked. "He said the boy's death was an accident. And Rowan Calloway? You working that payout too?" Marsh nodded, tears running down his face now. "He asked me to pre-file the disbursement paperwork. Said the guardianship order would go through Friday, and he wanted the money to move fast. I knew something was wrong. But You did it anyway," Switchback finished. "I needed the money," Marsh whispered. "My wife's medical bills, cancer treatment, were drowning, and Randall said it was just paperwork. He said I wasn't hurting anyone." Switchback looked at him for a long moment. This wasn't a predator. This was a coward. Someone who saw evil and chose his own comfort over a child's life. And somehow, that made it worse. "How many victims?" Switchback asked. "Total. Don't lie to me." Marsh's hands were shaking so hard he had to clasp them together. 7. Maybe 8. I handled the financial side. Randall handled placement. We never talked about what happened after." "You never asked," Switchback said. "No." Switchback pulled out his phone, started recording. "Tell me everything. From the beginning. Every name. Every amount. Every document you processed." Marsh talked for 43 minutes, and when he was done, Switchback had enough evidence to connect Pruitt to a network of financial fraud spanning 6 years, 8 victims, and over $700,000 stolen from children who had no one to protect them. Agent Kellerman sat across from Cobra and Gallows at the clubhouse, a folder of documents spread on the table between them. She'd removed her jacket, rolled up her sleeves, exhausted in the way people get when they've been working a case for months and finally see the edge of something real. "I'm told you have something relevant to an open federal investigation," she said. Cobra looked at Gallows. Gallows nodded. "Depends on what you're investigating," Cobra said. "Randall Pruitt. Financial exploitation of minors in state custody. Wire fraud. Conspiracy to commit fraud." Cobra slid a phone across the table. "Wendell Marsh, county clerk. Full recorded confession. He details 7 to 8 victims Pruitt targeted, financial amount stolen, timeline of operations, and his own role expediting trust payouts." Kellerman picked up the phone. Pressed play. Listened. Her expression didn't change, but she stopped writing. Then she leaned forward. "How long has your office known about Pruitt?" Cobra asked. Kellerman's jaw tightened. 6 months. And in 6 months, how many kids did he place? She didn't answer. We got Rowan out in 48 hours, Cobra said quietly. You had 6 months. Kellerman set the phone down. The system doesn't move that fast. We need warrants. We need evidence that holds up in court. We need to build cases that don't collapse because someone missed a procedural step. And while you're building your case, kids die, Cobra said. Yes. Kellerman didn't look away. That's the reality. The system wasn't built for speed. It was built for accuracy. And sometimes accuracy costs time people don't have. Rowan didn't have time, Cobra said. I know. Kellerman pulled a business card from her pocket, wrote something on the back, slid it across the table. This is my direct line. If you ever find yourself in a situation like this again, where a child needs help and the system's too slow, you call me first. We'll move faster. Cobra looked at the card, then at Kellerman. You do right by Rowan. That's the job, Kellerman said. She gathered the documents, stood. This recording fills a gap we couldn't close. Marsh implicates himself, Pruitt, and provides a pattern we can use to investigate the other victims. Combined with the physical evidence from Pruitt's property and Rowan's testimony, we have enough for federal charges. What's he looking at? Gallows asked. 15 to 22 years, Kellerman said. Wire fraud, conspiracy, abuse of a minor, financial exploitation, obstruction. Marsh will face charges too, probably 8 to 12 as an accessory. And if any of those other victims come forward with testimony about abuse or neglect, those charges stack. And if they don't come forward? Cobra asked. Then we prosecute what we can prove, Kellerman said. But Pruitt's done. He'll never work with children again. He'll never have access to a trust fund. And he'll spend the next 2 decades in a federal facility where the other inmates know exactly what he did. She paused at the door. The system didn't save Rowan. You did. I won't forget that. That night, the brothers gathered one more time. The full count was in. The evidence was assembled, and the numbers, laid out in Tombstone's careful handwriting on the whiteboard at the front of the room, told a story that made grown men go silent. 8 victims. Children placed in Pruitt's care over 6 years. Ages 7 to 16. 2 confirmed deaths. Dale Newcomb, 9 years old, ruled accidental. Marcus Holloway, 16, ruled suicide. $734,600 stolen. Combined total of trust funds, insurance settlements, and estate payouts, Pruitt gained access to through guardianship or coordinator authority. 17 complaints filed. Teachers, neighbors, mandated reporters, all flagged through official channels. Pruitt intercepted 14 of them using his DCS credentials. The other 3 were closed without investigation. 0 audits conducted. Not one independent review of Pruitt's financial management of trust accounts in 6 years of operation. Tombstone set the marker down, turned to face the room. This wasn't one bad actor, he said. This was a system designed to fail. A system where a licensed coordinator can intercept complaints about himself, where trust accounts release without oversight, where children's deaths are classified as accidents with no follow-up, where the people tasked with protecting kids are the same people exploiting them, and there's no mechanism to catch it until someone dies. Gallows stood. The charges? Kellerman had provided a preliminary list. Wire fraud, 8 counts. Financial exploitation of a minor, 8 counts. Conspiracy to commit fraud, 3 counts. Child endangerment, 4 counts. Obstruction of justice, 6 counts. Abuse of a minor, 2 counts. Wendell Marsh faces accessory charges on most of those, Tombstone added. and the FBI's opening investigations into 3 other DCS employees who signed off on paperwork without verifying Pruitt's claims. Cobra looked at the whiteboard. 8 names. 8 children who had no one. And a system that looked the other way while they disappeared. Justice has been served, Cobra said quietly. But justice wasn't the ending. He turned to the brothers. 397 men who'd dropped everything, driven hours, and stood on a residential street because one 7-year-old had the courage to ask for help. It was only the beginning. Friday morning, 7:42 a.m. Millbrook County Family Court, 3rd floor, courtroom C. Judge William Haverford's docket showed one item scheduled for 8 o'clock. In re. Permanent guardianship of Rowan Calloway, minor. At 7:43, Tombstone walked into the courthouse, carrying his briefcase and a motion-stamped emergency. Requires immediate review. By 7:51, Judge Haverford had read it. By 7:58, he'd signed an order postponing the hearing indefinitely pending criminal investigation. At 8 a.m., the exact moment Randall Pruitt's permanent guardianship was supposed to be finalized, Pruitt was being transferred from county holding to federal custody. Bail set at $500,000. Flight risk. Evidence of intent to flee the country. The money never moved. The gavel never fell. And Rowan Calloway, for the first time in 11 months, woke up in a place where nobody was coming to hurt him. Ironside sat in the waiting room at Millbrook General, 4th floor, pediatric wing. He'd brought a book, a worn paperback Western he'd been reading for 3 years, and still hadn't finished. He wasn't reading it now, just holding it, waiting. Rowan had been in the exam room for 47 minutes, full physical, blood work, x-rays, the kind of comprehensive evaluation that should have happened 11 months ago when he was first placed with Pruitt. The door opened. Dr. Sarah Venkatisan stepped out. Early 40s, pediatrician, 15 years of practice, the kind of doctor who'd seen enough neglect cases to recognize malnutrition at a glance. She pulled off her gloves, looked at Ironside. "Acute malnutrition," she said. Her voice was clinical, controlled, but there was anger underneath. 11 pounds underweight, vitamin D deficiency, anemia, dehydration, signs of refeeding syndrome beginning. His electrolytes are imbalanced from sudden food intake after prolonged starvation. "What does he need?" Ironside asked. "Supervised nutrition plan. Small, frequent meals. Supplementation. Physical therapy for muscle atrophy. And therapy, the psychological kind, because the physical damage is only part of it." She paused. "If you hadn't gotten him out when you did, we'd be looking at permanent cognitive impact within the next 2 to 3 weeks. His body was starting to shut down." Ironside's jaw tightened. "Can I see him?" Dr. Venkatasan nodded. Stepped aside. Rowan was sitting on the exam table, legs dangling, wearing a hospital gown that was too big. He looked small, fragile, but his eyes tracked to Ironside the moment the door opened, and something in his posture shifted. Not fear. Recognition. "Hey, kid," Ironside said. He held up a granola bar he'd bought from the vending machine. "Brought you something." Rowan took it, unwrapped it carefully, took a bite. Dr. Venkatasan watched. Then she looked at Ironside. "Thank you for getting him here when you did." That night, the clubhouse felt different. Quieter, warmer. The long table that usually hosted chapter meetings was set with mismatched plates and silverware someone had scrounged from their own kitchens. Gallows had cooked. Spaghetti, garlic bread, nothing fancy, but enough to feed 20 brothers who'd stayed behind while the rest of the chapter dispersed back to their home states. Rowan sat between Cobra and Ironside, a plate in front of him. Pasta with butter, no sauce. A slice of bread, a glass of water. He picked up his fork, looked at Cobra. "Eat," Cobra said. "Nobody's going to take it." Rowan took a bite, chewed, swallowed, took another. And this time, there was no timer. No one counting how long he took. No consequence for asking for more. The refrigerator hummed, the same sound that had filled the room 2 days ago when the brothers first gathered. But now it didn't sound ominous. It just sounded like a refrigerator. Someone passed the bread basket. Rowan took a second slice without asking. Ate it slowly. And for the first time in 11 months, the smell of food didn't make him anxious. It just made him feel less hungry. The apartment was on Maple Street, 2nd floor, 2 bedrooms. Clean and quiet. It belonged to a woman named Charlotte Reeves. 58, retired nurse, widow, member of the church Gallows attended when he wasn't riding. She'd called Gallows on Friday afternoon. Said she had space. Said she'd been a foster parent 20 years ago and always regretted stopping. Said if the boy needed somewhere safe, her door was open. The chapter had raised $14,300 in 48 hours. Contributions from members, anonymous donations, money quietly passed hand to hand with no names attached. It covered first and last month's rent, furniture, clothes, school supplies, and a fund for emergencies. Saturday morning, Cobra and Gallows walked Rowan up the stairs to apartment 2B. Charlotte opened the door. Gray hair pulled back, soft smile, hands that looked like they'd spent decades caring for people. "You must be Rowan," she said. Rowan nodded. "I made up the 2nd bedroom for you. Blue walls. I hope that's okay. And there's a window that looks out over the park." She stepped aside. "Come see." Rowan walked in slowly. The apartment smelled like coffee and cinnamon. The walls were painted warm colors. There were bookshelves, a couch that looked comfortable, a kitchen table with 4 chairs. Charlotte led him to the 2nd bedroom. The door was open. Inside on a twin bed with a blue comforter, a desk, a lamp, a bookshelf with a few books already on it. Sunlight coming through the window. "It's yours," Charlotte said gently. "No locks on the outside. No rules about food. You can eat when you're hungry. You can leave your door open or closed. This is your space." Rowan stood in the doorway, staring. Cobra crouched beside him, pulled a single key from his pocket, placed it in Rowan's hand. "This is yours too," Cobra said. "Front door key. You can come and go. You're not locked in. You're not a prisoner. You're safe." Rowan closed his hand around the key, looked at the room, then at Charlotte, then at Cobra. "Thank you," he said quietly. It was the first time he'd said those words in 11 months, and meant them. Sunday afternoon, the brothers gathered one last time before heading home. Cinder crouched next to Rowan, pulled a phone from his pocket. Prepaid, simple, already loaded with contacts. "This is for you. My number's in there. Ironsides, Gallowses, Cobras. Anytime, and I mean anytime, you need something, you call. It doesn't matter if it's 2 a.m. or you just want to talk. We answer." Rowan took the phone, held it carefully. Tombstone adjusted his glasses, handed Rowan a folder. "Legal documents. Restraining order against Randall Pruitt. He's not allowed within 500 feet of you, ever. Victim advocate contact information, therapy referrals, and a letter I wrote to the family court formally requesting you be placed with Charlotte under supervised guardianship with chapter oversight. It's already filed." Switchback stepped forward. Didn't crouch, just stood there, arms crossed, looking at Rowan with the kind of respect you give someone who survived something you're not sure you could have. "You did good, kid," Switchback said. "You asked for help when nobody else would listen. That took more guts than most adults have." Ironside was last. He knelt, eye level, the way he'd done in the clubhouse when he first examined Rowan. "You've got a follow-up appointment Tuesday. I'll be there. And we're setting up physical therapy twice a week, plus nutritional counseling. You're going to get strong again. It's going to take time, but you'll get there." He paused. "And Rowan, you're going to have hard days. Days where you remember what happened, and it feels like it's still happening. That's normal. That doesn't mean you're broken. It just means you survived something nobody should have to survive. And when those days come, you call one of us." Rowan nodded. Cobra stood at the edge of the group, watching. When the others stepped back, he walked forward, placed one hand on Rowan's shoulder. "You're not alone anymore," Cobra said. "You've got brothers now. And we don't leave our own behind." Rowan looked up at him. 7 years old, 51 pounds, bruises still fading, but standing straighter than he had 3 days ago. "I know," Rowan said. And he did. The legal protection came through on Monday. Restraining order signed. Pruitt's bail hearing resulted in detention pending trial. Judge ruled him a flight risk after evidence of the Cancun ticket was presented. Sentencing wouldn't come for months. But the charges were clear. 15 federal counts, projected sentence of 18 to 22 years, no possibility of early release. Wendell Marsh pled guilty to accessory charges in exchange for testimony. 8 years, eligible for parole in 5. The DCS launched an internal review. 3 employees placed on administrative leave. The county implemented new oversight protocols, mandatory independent audits of all trust accounts, third-party welfare checks for high-risk placements, and a whistleblower hotline for mandated reporters. It wouldn't fix everything. But it was a start. And Rowan started 2nd grade at Millbrook Elementary on Tuesday morning, 2 weeks late but enrolled, his name on a roster, a backpack on his shoulders, and a lunch packed by Charlotte that included a sandwich, an apple, a granola bar, and a note that said, "Have a good day." He walked into that building with Cobra standing outside, watching until Rowan disappeared through the front doors. Then Cobra got on his bike and rode home. But the story wasn't over. Because this story isn't really about bikers or patches or motorcycles lined up on a residential street. It's about what happens when one person decides that looking away isn't an option anymore. Cobra didn't plan to be at the park. He'd been riding past, Sunday morning, taking the long way home from the clubhouse, when he saw Charlotte's car in the parking lot. She was sitting on a bench near the playground, reading a book, coffee cup beside her. And 30 feet away, on the swings, Rowan was laughing. Not a polite laugh, not a careful, controlled sound designed not to draw attention. A real laugh, the kind that came from somewhere deep and unguarded, the sound of a kid being a kid. There was another boy on the swing next to him, maybe 8 years old, pumping his legs to go higher. They were racing, seeing who could swing higher, faster, who could lean back farther without falling. Rowan was losing. But he didn't care. Cobra pulled over, parked, stayed on the bike. Charlotte noticed him, waved. He nodded back but didn't approach. This wasn't his moment. It was Rowan's. He watched for another 3 minutes. Watched Rowan jump off the swing at the peak of the arc, clumsy, stumbling landing, but laughing the whole time. Watched him run to the slide. Watched him climb up and slide down and run back around to do it again. And Cobra felt something he hadn't expected. Not pride, not satisfaction. Grief. The specific grief that lives alongside relief. The understanding that what was taken from Rowan, 11 months of being 7 years old, 11 months of safety and childhood, and the ability to laugh without checking over your shoulder, could never be fully returned. Just worked around, built over, survived. Cobra pulled out his phone, opened his photos, found the picture Ironside had taken 3 weeks ago. Rowan sitting at the clubhouse table, eating eggs, the bandana still tied around his wrist. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he put the phone away, started the engine, pulled out of the parking lot. He didn't look back. Rowan didn't need him right now. And that was exactly the point. Rowan stopped counting the days since he left Breckenridge Mill Road. He didn't remember exactly when he stopped. Somewhere around month 6, the number had just stopped mattering. He'd been counting up to something. Distance, safety, proof that he was far enough away that it couldn't reach him anymore. But then he started counting different days. The days since he'd started therapy. The days since he made honor roll. The days until his birthday, which Charlotte was planning with the kind of care that made it clear birthdays weren't obligations. They were celebrations. He was 8 now. 63 pounds. Still a little underweight, but Dr. Venkatasan said he was on track. His hair was thicker. His skin had color. The bruises had faded months ago. He'd started sleeping with the lights off 3 months ago. Started eating without watching the door 2 months ago. Started raising his hand in class without flinching 5 weeks ago. And last Tuesday, he'd done something he hadn't planned. He'd signed up to mentor a younger kid at school. First grader. New to the district. Quiet. The kind of quiet that Rowan recognized because he'd worn it himself. Not shyness. Survival. The program paired them for lunch twice a week. Rowan sat across from the kid. Marcus, 6 years old, barely spoke, ate his sandwich in tiny bites like he was rationing. "You can have more," Rowan said, pushing his own apple across the table. "I brought 2. Marcus looked at the apple, then at Rowan. "You sure?" "Yeah." Marcus took it, ate it slowly, and when lunch ended, he said, "Thank you," so quietly, Rowan almost didn't hear it. But he did hear it, and he understood, in a way most 8-year-olds couldn't, that sometimes the smallest kindness is the one that matters most. At the clubhouse, Gallows pinned a new photo to the bulletin board. Rowan's school picture from this year, blue shirt, real smile, eyes that didn't look too wide anymore. Beneath it, someone had written in marker, "One of ours." The chapter had started something new after Rowan's case. Called it Angel's Watch. A network, not formal, not advertised, just word passed quietly among people who knew people, for kids who needed help and didn't know where to turn. In 14 months, they'd responded to 9 calls. Not all of them ended with FBI arrests. Some were simpler. A kid who needed school supplies, a teenager who needed a ride away from a bad situation, a family that needed groceries after a parent lost a job. But they all ended with someone being less alone than they were before. The chapter raised $18,700 that year. Funded therapy for 3 kids. Paid rent for 2 families. Bought winter coats for 30 children whose school had flagged them for inadequate cold weather clothing. It wasn't a system, it was a response. And it worked because it started with one simple principle. When someone asks for help, you show up. Cinder stopped by Charlotte's apartment one Saturday afternoon. Knocked. Charlotte answered, smiled, invited him in. "Just checking in," Cinder said. "Wanted to see if you needed anything." "We're good," Charlotte said. "Rowan's in his room working on a science project. You want to say hi?" "Nah, don't want to interrupt. Just wanted to make sure." He handed her an envelope. Chapter voted. This is for Rowan's college fund. We'll add to it every year. Charlotte opened it. Check for $2,500. She looked at Cinder. Her eyes were wet. You don't have to... We know, Cinder said. We want to. He left before she could argue, because that's what brothers did. They didn't wait for permission to help. They just helped. Rowan was 13 when he met Emma. She was sitting in the counselor's office at Millbrook Middle School, arms crossed, staring at the floor, wearing the same expression Rowan had worn 6 years ago. Exhausted determination mixed with fragile, terrified hope. New student, emergency placement, foster care. The counselor had pulled Rowan out of class and asked if he'd be willing to show Emma around, help her settle in. Rowan said yes before the counselor finished asking. He recognized the look. He'd worn it for 11 months. They walked through the hallway together. Rowan pointed out classrooms, the cafeteria, the library. Emma didn't say much, just nodded. Followed. At lunch, Rowan sat across from her. She had a tray, pizza, green beans, a carton of milk. She picked at the pizza, tore off tiny pieces, ate slowly. You can have more if you want, Rowan said. They don't ration it here. Emma looked at him. How do you know I'm... She stopped. But Rowan knew what she was going to say. Because I was in the system too, Rowan said quietly. 6 years ago. And I know what it looks like when someone's not sure the food is actually theirs. Emma's hands stopped moving. She stared at him. What happened? She asked. Someone helped me, Rowan said. A group of people who didn't have to care but did anyway. And now I'm okay. Not perfect. I still have bad days. But okay. He pushed his own milk across the table. You're going to be okay too. It doesn't feel like it right now. But you will. Emma took the milk, opened it, drank. And for the first time that day, something in her face shifted. Not hope, not yet. But the beginning of the thought that maybe, this time would be different. 3 weeks later, Emma told her caseworker something she'd been too afraid to say before. The caseworker listened, filed a report, an investigation opened, and the foster home Emma had been placed in, the one where food was used as punishment, where doors locked from the outside, where bruises were explained away as rough play, was shut down within a month. Emma was moved to a new placement. Safer. Better. And she stayed in school at Millbrook Middle, where every Tuesday and Thursday she ate lunch with Rowan and talked about normal things, homework, movies, the upcoming school dance. She didn't know that Rowan had called Cinder the night she first told him she was scared. Didn't know that Cinder had called Cobra. Didn't know that Cobra had made 3 phone calls that resulted in Emma's case being flagged for immediate review. She just knew that someone had listened. And that was enough. Cobra kept the map. The piece of notebook paper Rowan had folded twice and tucked under his handlebar grip 6 years ago. He'd had it laminated, pinned it inside the clubhouse meeting room, right next to the chapter charter and the memorial wall. Everyone who walked into that room saw it. The crooked lines in blue pen, the red X marking 214 Breckenridge Mill Road. The words, I can't eat. Please come. Rowan, age 7. Newer members asked about it. Older members told the story. And every time someone new joined the chapter, Gallows would point to that map and say the same thing. That's why we do this. On a Thursday night in late October, 6 years, 4 months, and 11 days after Rowan walked into that parking lot, Cobra sat alone in the clubhouse after a chapter meeting. Everyone else had gone home. The building was quiet. He stood in front of the map for a long time. His phone buzzed. Text from Charlotte. Rowan made honor roll again. Wants to thank you in person. Dinner this weekend? Cobra smiled. Typed back, I'll be there. He looked at the map one more time. 6 years ago, he'd made a promise to a 7-year-old boy who had no reason to believe promises meant anything. He'd said, Nobody touches you again. You've got my word, and my word has teeth. He'd kept that promise. But the truth Cobra had learned over 50 years of watching systems fail and people look away and evil hide in plain sight, was this. Keeping your word wasn't the heroic part. Showing up when someone asked for help, even when you were the last person they should have trusted, even when you looked like the kind of man people crossed the street to avoid, that was the heroic part. Because the world told Rowan that men who looked like Cobra were dangerous. And Rowan, 7 years old and 11 pounds underweight and out of options, had decided to trust one anyway. That choice, that act of desperate, courageous faith, had saved his life. And it had reminded Cobra why he rode, why he wore the patch, why he'd quit CPS and joined the Brotherhood and spent 30 years showing up for people nobody else would help. Not because he was good, but because sometimes the scariest-looking person in a room is exactly who you need. This story isn't about motorcycles or leather vests or 400 men standing on a residential street. It's about what happens when one person, one child, decides that asking for help is worth the risk. And it's about what happens when the person they ask decides that showing up is worth the cost. If you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever been the one who needed help and didn't know where to turn, if you've ever been told that the people who were supposed to protect you were the ones hurting you, this story is for you. Because you deserve to be seen. You deserve to be safe. And you deserve someone who will show up when you ask. And if you're on the other side, if you're the neighbor who sees something wrong, the teacher who notices a child who's too quiet, the stranger in the parking lot who finds a note tucked under your windshield wiper, listen. Pay attention. Ask questions. Don't assume someone else will handle it. Because sometimes you're the only one who can. 6 years after Rowan walked into that grocery store parking lot, he walks into school every morning with his head up and his shoulders back. He eats lunch without counting bites. He laughs without checking over his shoulder. He helps younger kids who wear the same expression he used to wear. He's not healed. Healing doesn't work that way. But he's safe. He's seen. And he knows that if he ever needs help again, there are people who will answer. That's what the Hell's Angels gave him. Not a rescue, a reminder that in a world designed to make you invisible, there are still people who will see you. Subscribe to Gentle Biker Official if you believe ordinary people can do extraordinary things when someone needs them. Comment below, not just where you're watching from, but tell me, have you ever been the person who needed help? Or the person who showed up? Share your story. Let's remind each other that we're not alone. And if this story meant something to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because somewhere right now, there's a kid like Rowan, and they need to know that help is possible. The grocery store parking lot looks the same. Same cracked asphalt, same cart return, same distant sound of a freight train from the rail crossing 2 blocks east. But if you stand in the right spot, the east edge, near the row where the motorcycles used to park, and you close your eyes, you can almost see it. A 7-year-old boy with a piece of notebook paper folded twice, walking across the lot with a flapping sneaker sole and shoulders pulled inward, tucking the map under a stranger's handlebar grip, and choosing hope one more time.